welcome to Wilderness Wanderers. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming adventures. This week, we're still in Death Valley, but we drive to Nevada to explore the gold mining ghost town of Rhylite. We learn the history of the town, get a little too close to an abandoned mine shaft, and take in the strangest version of the Last Supper we have ever seen. Here we go.
We rise with the sun to experience these stunning views, and after a quick walk with the dogs, we're ready to go.
We're on the road. It's really not that cold, but I feel a little chilly. Anyway, 61 is cool for us. We just passed the Harmony Borax Works, and now we are heading toward Nevada. The views here in Death Valley they're mind-blowing.
Beatty is a true Wild West town with casinos and saloons galore. The one RV park we spotted looked reasonable enough, although it appeared to have a scrap metal yard next door. Beatty is the eastern entrance and the self-proclaimed gateway to Death Valley. One of the first buildings is one of the best preserved bottle houses in the West.
Look at this, like Fort Knox. Well, they definitely do not want you going in here, that's for sure.
In the desert, there's no building materials. We've seen this at Calico Ghost Town. They take whatever building materials they had on hand, which would be empty beer bottles, and they would make buildings out of them.
The Tom Kelly Bottle House is featured in movies Wonder of the Wasteland and The Airmail. So this guy built it, never lived in it, and then raffled it off. But he lost money. He didn't make enough on the raffle. Mining is and always has been a hazardous occupation. Miners worked long hours underground, sinking shafts and cutting underground tunnels to reach the rich ore deposits. Rhyolite miners taking a well-earned break in 1906, a miners' parade in 1907. The first school opened in 1906 with 26 students. This is the second schoolhouse built in Rhylite. The first was a small wooden building. Upper grades of the first schoolhouse in April 1907. 1 year after opening, 225 additional students were enrolled. Gold was discovered here in 1904, and by 1905 this entire area was covered with tents and prospectors, all hoping to strike it rich. This became the land of plenty, and in 1905 Rhyolite became a city. Over 1,000 people once lived in this area. This here was the Overbury building. John Overbury came from New Jersey. He arrived in what the papers described as a swell Oldsmobile. Originally, this was supposed to be a 2-story building, but when Overbury noticed that somebody was building a 3-story building, he decided to make this a 3-story building. I'm not sure what this once was, but it looks like it could have maybe been the safe. It's certainly got thick walls, see? The walls are very thick. And I don't know whether that's a tin roof ceiling or whatever it is, it's pretty cool. Of course, the most impressive building in any town is usually the bank, and that's what this is. The Cook Bank is one of the most iconic buildings in Rhyolite, and it's one of the most photographed ruins in Nevada. It was one of 4 banks here, and despite its opulence, the Cook Bank was open less than 2 years.
We walked up Main Street towards the railway station. There's a large turning circle at the top for tour buses and RVs. This is where the restrooms are located. Kat headed off behind the restrooms as she spied more evidence of the miners with trash and building ruins.
Well, this was somebody's cabin once. Maybe this person struck more gold than the person in the wooden shed. After our time exploring silver mines in Arizona, which you can watch up here, we recognized the signs of abandoned mine shafts and headed over. Kev had to hold on to me as I leant over to get this shot. Not the best idea I've ever had. I found a stone to test the depth of the mine shaft, and you can normally hear as they drop deeper and deeper down. Well, that was pretty unimpressive.
We explored more of this area and discovered further remnants of the inhabitants of Rhylite. This whole area was once filled with houses and other buildings.
Behind me is the railway station. This was connected to 3 different railroads, but the main one was the Las Vegas Tonopah Railroad, and that came through here for the first time in 1907, and it had 100 passengers on board. Sadly, by 1919, the railroad had lost so much money that the track was salvaged, and no more did trains come to Rhyolite. In the 1920s and 30s, this area did have somewhat of a revival, and this behind me became a casino.
The old train station is by far the best preserved building in Rhyolite. We spent quite a long time taking photos and enjoying the views and architecture of the station.
This building was left to go to ruin in the 1930s. It was later acquired by the Bureau of Land Management in a land swap, and it is still owned by BLM. I imagine that sitting out here on a winter day when it was nice and warm and watching the people work on the gold mines must have been quite the place.
Check out this old train signal semaphore right here. We learned about this when we were in Wales, where you pull the levers back and forth, and it would change this, and it would change the track as well. When you see an old bed frame like this outside an old hotel, you just wonder what kind of activity went on.
Oh my goodness!
This caboose is from the early 1900s and is in a sorry state. Again, there's a fence all around, so no exploring inside, but it's still a wonderful relic of the time. Here we are at the train station. As the passengers left, here's the view they can see as the train line winds up this road and through the valley.
While you're out here, it isn't hard to imagine the difficult living conditions and the hardships that the miners and their families endured.
This was by far Kat's favorite building to photograph. The cold got too much and we drove back down Main Street as the dark clouds rolled in. But this wasn't the end of our adventure.
On the same road to Rhyolite is the Goldwell Open Air Museum. This is an eclectic collection of modern art set across the backdrop of open desert. A couple of the pieces were enormous, but by far the most imposing and spooky piece was The Last Supper. Probably the ghostliest version of The Last Supper we've ever experienced. It was way spookier in black and white. At least the artist's self-portrait had a little color. We were heading towards the cemetery, but, we couldn't see anything and it was a really dubious-looking dirt road, so we decided against it. But man, I am freezing cold.
It's 45 degrees with a constant wind. After a little research, we learned that there is a plaque and a few marked, but mostly unmarked graves at the Bullfrog Rhyolite Cemetery. One researcher claimed to have counted over 200 unmarked graves. We hope you enjoyed our tour and the history of Rhyolite Ghost Town as much as we did. Join us next week as we drive from 200 feet below sea level to 6,800 feet above, visiting the historic charcoal kilns. We also take in the sand dunes and the most incredible overlook we've ever experienced. Until then, we'll see you on the trail.